To analyze how next-generation AI can empower government, please welcome Reuben Richards, Technical Director of the Public Sector at the SAS Institute, Adita Karkera, Chief Data Officer for the Government and Public Services Practice at Deloitte, and Saptarshi Banerjee, Senior Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. This conversation will be moderated by Rama G. Elluru, Senior Director for Society and Intellectual Property at SCSP.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel, Empowering Governments with Next Generation AI. I'm Rama Elluru, Senior Director of AI Governance and Intellectual Property at SCSP. I'll be your moderator for this very dynamic conversation. The discussion will be based on the recent Office of Management and Budget memos, directives on AI procurement and use for the public good, with a focus on next generation AI, specifically autonomous and agentic AI, systems that are capable of performing tasks autonomously without constant human guidance. We have three distinguished speakers today: Adita Karkera, Chief Data Officer at Deloitte Government and Public Services. Next, Reuben Richards, Senior Technical Director at SAS, and Saptarshi Banerjee, Senior Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. Welcome to each of you. In furtherance of the President's AI Executive Order, the OMB issued guidance memos on procuring and using AI with a specific emphasis on data governance and data sharing and governance as foundational to effective AI use. Adita, could you start us off? What are the considerations government leaders implementing the OMB guidance should keep in mind to ensure secure transfer of information, and how can the private sector support such efforts to mitigate emerging harms?
Hey, thanks for the question, Rama. And first, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here today, and it's going to be a great discussion. So excited to have this conversation, Reuben, with you and Saptarshi. So talking about the OMB guidance, yes, very rightfully, OMB did emphasize the need for data sharing to help us accelerate the adoption of AI across federal government. So completely agree on the need for data sharing to bring across the silos in government and gain insights, because really AI is all about gaining insights through the silos across government, and that's really the only way that you can get some intelligence out of those data sets, right? But as I talk to CDOs and I talk to CAIOs, and having been a former government CDO myself, you know, there are day-to-day challenges that these CDOs are facing. It's not that they don't want to accelerate AI adoption, but the challenges they face every day are around lack of standardization in these data types that they're talking about sharing. And just think about this, it's not the lack of standardization and lack of data interoperability within divisions of an organization. The problem is more complex when they talk about data sharing between agencies and organizations. And really, that's what you need to gain intelligence using AI when you're talking about sharing data between organizations, especially when it comes to national competitiveness or matters of, you know, transportation or economic competitiveness, right? So it is not an easy problem. It's a pretty complex issue. But I think having the right and robust governance frameworks in place is going to help us kind of alleviate some of those issues, right? I mean, start off with just having common data terminologies between departments. Like, what you define for a certain data asset, is it the same definition across the different agencies that you're trying to share data with? Because that's something basic, like, are there data catalogs in place? Or do you have open data standards for sharing those data sets? And then get into the picture the needs of security, right? I mean, we're dealing with citizen data here. And as you talk about more and more complex data sets, I mean, how are you managing data privacy? Do you have anonymization methods in place? How are you ensuring that you're actually protecting the data that you're trying to share here, right? I mean, the complexity continues to grow. But keeping in mind that you could have a really unified approach where CDOs and CAIOs could think about how do you bring together standards, principles, procedures that are not only applicable to your organization, but then CDO councils and other CAIO councils could start adopting those to make data sharing easier, right? So I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. And when I talk to data and AI leaders, I'm like, hey, let's talk about, you know, acknowledging the problem and getting real with it and trying to get practical about how can we really mitigate these issues.
Thank you. Thank you for those interesting comments on especially the standards and norms. Reuben, from a technical analytics perspective,
Right.
how does strong data governance influence the success of AI systems in government?
Great. Yeah, well, thank you for the question, and I'm delighted to be here, folks. And if you're not familiar with SAS, SAS is an analytics platform that provides analytical capabilities. So I'm taking it from that perspective. So a strong data governance foundation, as it accelerates AI projects, first off, is the question of trust, right? And is this number accurate or not accurate? And then within that, the implied success in being able to trace that answer back to its source system. So first and foremost, accuracy, traceability, and then the second dimension I like to think about, or that we think about at SAS, is the ethical use and the ethical and responsible use of the AI component. And from that, we bring tools that would detect bias, evaluate fairness, and of course, implied with that is the security and privacy of the data, making sure that all those regulatory compliance things are held in place. And then a third benefit of a strong data governance foundation, of course, comes from efficiency, right? In an analytical world, everyone uses the 80-20 analogy to describe, 80% of the work being data prep and data wrangling, and that last 20% is where the value comes out in the analytics. With a strong governance foundation in place, it's still going to be 80-20, but it's going to be a much shorter time period of 80%, right? So it's going to really accelerate and make your teams much more efficient. And then you touched on it a little bit, but the ability also to break down those silos that exist within the organization, within the enterprise, the data systems that were never designed to talk to each other, bringing analytical techniques for entity resolution and techniques around probabilistic entity resolution, where you're considering the full breadth of all the columns for making match codes to join data together. For example, we've got a really great program out of the state of North Carolina called CJ Leads, which has been around for, about 10-12 years, and that is an effort to integrate all these disparate systems together and provide an interface for law enforcement. So at the point where they're pulling a car over, they can run a license plate or a driver's license and get a fully integrated view of the person that they're about to walk up, and knock on the car window. So it's proven to be extremely valuable in that context. And again, it's all based on having that data governance layer in place.
Thank you for those insights. And you mentioned public trust, and I want to get back to that in a second. But first, Saptarshi, from your vantage point at AWS, what role does cloud infrastructure play in enabling robust data governance for federal AI deployments?
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. I'm Saptarshi. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect in AWS. So from an AWS perspective, cloud infrastructure serves as the foundation enabler for federal AI data governance in three critical ways. So the first actually provides centralized control at scale. So when federal AI deployments or federal AI agencies deploy the AI workloads across multiple environments, AWS services like Lake Formation and Glue Data Catalog provides a single pane of glass for data classification and access control. But this is not just convenience. When you're dealing with sensitive federal AI data workloads with sensitive data operations, which need consistent data governance across multiple departments and use cases, it's actually very essential. Second, and this is where Amazon Bedrock Guardrails security plays a very important role in federal AI deployments. So just for you to know, Amazon Bedrock is our Amazon Web Services service where you can deploy your generative AI workloads, and you do have the choice of using leading foundation model providers for that. So coming specifically into this, so what is Amazon Bedrock Security Guardrails? So when federal AI deployments deploy their workloads across different environments, Amazon Bedrock Guardrails provides automated reasoning checks, which actually prevents factual errors from hallucinations. Now, this is very important because when you're dealing with federal use cases where accuracy is mission critical, this actually helps a lot. Now, secondly, for federal AI deployments, Amazon Bedrock Security Guardrails actually blocks 88% of harmful multimodal content, and 75% and filters out 75% of hallucination in RAG responses and policy summarization documents. So when you're dealing with sensitive federal AI data documents, policy summarization scenarios, or even I would say, any use cases such as citizen-facing applications, this is very critical. And because security is not just essential, it's utmost important as well. Now, the beauty in this works is that this is actually available to all the foundational models. So whether you have models that are hosted on AWS, fine-tuned models, or even models hosted outside of AWS, this is applicable to all. So we just want to make sure that for every federal AI deployments, you do have a standardized governance response, and not irrespective of your AI infrastructure choices. And third, the compliance framework. So the compliance framework is built on FedRAMP. So this actually translates from data governance from manual oversight to automated reporting. And this is very important because you are taking away the operational overhead from federal AI agencies. Now, the bottom line is, cloud infrastructure plays a very important and vital role in, providing federal AI agencies deploying their AI workloads in a responsible way. And what we are doing is we are not only doing it, we are actually adding these advanced safeguard protections directly into the technology stack, so not as an afterthought. So that is very important.
Thank you. Another critical element emphasized by the OMB guidance is public trust and transparency. Adita, how should government agencies cultivate public trust, particularly when adopting autonomous AI systems across the government?
Yeah, that's like the number one thing, right? I mean, you can continue to create AI solutions every day, create all the coolest apps and demos, but if there is not trust from the public, it's not going to be leveraged. And I guess, if for a second, Rama, if I can put on my hat just as a citizen, just like all of us, right? Like, when we're looking at AI solutions created for citizens, you want to know what's it for, right? Like, what's the impact? Like, are we just creating an AI solution for just developing AI, or like, what is the impact for us? Is it helping me get better citizen services? Is it improving the effectiveness of national security? What is it for? So I think having transparency about that, like, hey, we're not just developing AI for AI, but because it really impacts us, having that transparency and that clear vision of what the impact is, and continuing to be able to measure that impact is really important to hone trust and transparency, I think. Another thing that I'm seeing being successful with AI solutions and adoption has been clear communications about explainability. What data is going in? How is it being processed? Is it really being applied commensurate with the regulations that surround it, right? And oftentimes when you're not translating it into clear comm strategies, it's not clear what the explainability is behind the scenes, right? And the last thing you want is a black box, right? So to get out of that, you have to have those clear communication strategies. The other thing, as you touched a little bit upon this, Rama, as we get into more complex, more multi-step solutions with agentic and autonomous solutions, the complexity continues to grow. And it's so much more important that we just don't create an AI governance framework and let it be. It's got to be audited, it's got to be communicated, and it's got to be reevaluated as changes happen internally to organizations as well as external factors, right? And together with that, it's important to keep human in the loop, right? Because especially for agentic solutions and for solutions that are impacting, like, finance decisions or HR decisions or critical decision points, it's so important to kind of keep that human oversight still in the mix, because I think we as humans all need a part of that. We just don't want it to be machines, but we want some human oversight to add that ethical layer that's needed to create and foster trust. And then the last point that I'll highlight is, we're talking about AI adoption in organizations across industry, right? And government is not different. But I think we as an industry and we as data and AI leaders have to acknowledge that we are seeing low literacy with AI in organizations. And if you don't understand the concept, you don't know how to implement it, you don't know how the security works, you don't know the internal nuances of it, you will not be able to humanly trust that solution. So it's not about AI coming in and taking your job. It's about having a basic level of AI literacy so you can have trust in what you see in front of you. And I think those 4 areas have probably been some of the most effective strategies that I'm seeing today to foster trust and transparency. Of course, you know, we've seen feedback loops, we've seen public forums to provide feedback. I mean, there are different solutions being implemented by organizations, but I think starting off with one of those 4 probably have turned to be successful mechanisms in my experience.
Great response. Saptarshi, how can cloud-based infrastructure support transparency and accountability in AI adoption, especially when dealing with sensitive government data?
Right, and that's a very crucial question because transparency with sensitive government data requires a fundamentally different approach than traditional AI applications. So from an AWS perspective, Amazon Bedrock, it provides unprecedented control and visibility for federal agencies. Now, let's start with data sovereignty. So with data sovereignty, you are in complete control of your data. So when federal agencies actually deploy their AI workloads on Amazon Bedrock, if they are using any leading foundation model providers or fine-tuning their models, customizing their model, we create a private copy just for you. So in order to make sure that there's no data leakage to third-party model providers, as well as to make sure that your data is not being trained to improve the base models. And this is very important because when you're dealing with critical and classified government information, this is actually very essential. Now, for transparency, Amazon Bedrock offers comprehensive monitoring. So we have CloudWatch and CloudTrail API. So every API level activity, so for example, your model invocations, your request and responses, your Amazon guardrail security triggers that we talked about in the previous question, everything is tracked. So in that way, what you can do is, you can have all of these requests and responses, metadata, access controls. You can store them in the Amazon S3 bucket of your choice, or even in CloudWatch logs. So in the end, what it does is actually creates an unbreakable audit trail that federal oversight generally requires. Now, security-wise, and this is a very important topic, so security-wise, everything is encrypted. So whenever you are deploying your applications or generative applications on Bedrock, the encryption, there's encryption in transit with HTTPS encryption, as well as encryption at rest using AWS KMS keys. Now, that is very important because you are in control of your keys through identity-based policies. Now, there is also another important point to this is we do have private connectivity, right? So we do have private link capability with Amazon Bedrock. So when federal agencies deploy their AI workloads on Amazon Bedrock, and these are sensitive workloads with sensitive government data, they do not need to traverse their traffic over the public internet. So there is no way, there is no reason for your VPC to touch the public internet. You can use the secure AWS network backbone for that. And additionally, for federal agencies, Bedrock is FedRAMP High, accessible in AWS GovCloud, and as well as with compliance certificates like HIPAA, SOC, HIPAA, SOC, and GDPR. So you are not hoping for compliance. Actually, you're building your foundation on an environment where it's already being certified. So we also talked about Bedrock guardrails a little bit, in our previous. So I would like to point on that. So whenever you're using Bedrock guardrails, right, you are actually there are explainable protections and comprehensive documentation on which content has been flagged or monitored. So, federal agencies have brief oversight as well as transparency and visibility into what they are deploying into these systems. So whenever you deploy into Amazon Bedrock, you have a peace of mind that you have transparency and visibility, and you are building next generation generative AI workloads securely. That's it.
Thank you. One of the things all of you have mentioned is how complicated these AI systems are. Reuben, how advanced analytics and AI can sometimes be what we call black boxes.
Correct.
What methods can government agencies deploy to ensure? What methods can governments deploy to ensure transparency in AI-driven decisions?
Great question, and appreciate your comments about the infrastructure, and also really appreciate your narrative about the human in the loop. I think I have a very similar perspective, and what I like to tell my team, and we talk to our customers, is really start with the end in mind, right? And then also consider that from a human-centered design. So where in that spectrum of the autonomous agent is the human oversight? And really start with that from a perspective of the design. For example, a really classic example that most everyone can appreciate, right? Scoring credit card transactions, right? There's autonomous scoring of thousands of credit card transactions. There's hundreds of prediction models surrounding that, approving or denying that credit card transaction. At some point, one of those models is alerting to an anomaly, and it has to send a text, right? Or pull in a human, pull someone in to review what's happening. Send a text to the card holder. Are you really in Maui buying those four surfboards, right? So it's that kind of thing, to bring the human in the loop. To accomplish that, I like to think about the design framework from an analytic decisioning perspective. So first off is having kind of that rules engine approach to kind of stitch everything together and create those agentic workflows that are stringing LLM models or predictive models or the full breadth of analytics capable or through that agentic workflow. Within that, from an administrative perspective, you're going to need that single pane of glass to see how all those models are performing. What is the true positive rate, the false positive rate, whatever decay is happening with the model. You might need to pull that model out of production, retrain the data, put it back into production. So you have to have that console in place. And then within any one model, right, you want to be able to drill down on that and see the model scorecard, right? We all know that's like the nutritional label on that particular model. What was it intended for? What are the bias measures on that? What are the source systems that model is trained on? All the various performance things are within that model card. And of course, from the model card, you want to be able to drill into the lineage of that model and understand all the source systems where it came from, what transformations were created on the data, what features have been generated, and really kind of roll that back up into the consoles. So, the technology is there to really govern this whole process. And again, as I started at the top, if you consider where the human is in this process and start from that point and then work backwards.
So we've talked about two important aspects of the guidance, data governance and public trust and transparency. Let's turn to implementation. You've seen firsthand the deployment of advanced analytics in government context. Can you discuss specific examples where autonomous or agentic AI has significantly enhanced decision making?
Sure, I love that question. I think one of my favorite examples of that comes from our healthcare practice, and again, think large government agencies that are responsible for processing claims in order to distribute some sort of benefit. Right, this use case happens all over the federal space, and the problem with that situation is you've got highly paid humans that have to, like nurse practitioners or medical professionals, that have to pour through huge, like 1,000-page PDFs that represent the medical history of that claim. And these PDFs, sometimes they have handwriting, they're appended together, sometimes there's duplicate entries, they come from different systems, and it's a very labor-intensive process to review that. We've got, to solve that problem, several implementations where we're able to apply AI-augmented OCR with deep learning models that are parsed through that PDF document of images, extract the facts from it, create those name-value pairs, and structure it into an analytical structure. And once it's in that analytical structure, you can start processing it with rules. You can use NLP techniques to really discern sentiment or summarize it, feed it to an LLM maybe to summarize it back up. And in these implementations, we take that analytic structure that's derived from these PDFs, and we present it back to the medical professional with bookmarks back to the source of where it came in the claim for a review process. An incredible amount of acceleration of the time to value and the scale. I think for one of our customers, we're processing 4 million images per night of medical claim pages per night.
It's a lot of productivity.
Yeah, a lot of productivity. It's really, it really takes a very labor-intensive, expensive process and automates it.
Nice. Adita, similar question to you. What are the practical steps you're taking in implementing OMB guidance on AI governance? Specifically, how can agencies balance innovation driven by ambitious AI adoption policies?
Yeah, and I appreciate, Reuben, all the comments earlier, because we are seeing, growth in adoption of agentic AI solutions across the board. So appreciated all of the use cases that you highlighted just now. But when we come to application of OMB guidance, right, some of the things are very clearly laid down in the guidance around, creation of a governance board, establishing the office of the CAIO, setting your AI strategy. We're, of course, helping our clients set up those AI offices, set up the governance bodies and the governance councils and AI strategies. But, if you're asking about, what practical steps are we really seeing happen, Rama, it all comes down to people, process, and technology, right? I think those are the three pillars. But I feel like, unless you, as an organization wanting to set up your AI plan, you got to start off with your policies, procedures, and frameworks first, right? Just basic things like how are you going to define your AI use case intake process? You just don't pick up an AI use case and you don't just pilot it and take it to production, right? So what does that intake process look like? We're helping several organizations just define that intake process and saying, what are the processes you want to keep in mind? I also want to highlight, bringing in the right stakeholders in the mix, because it's not just creating an AI product, but who are you catering to? Is it, so many Gen AI and agentic AI use cases don't really move from prototype stage to production, right? Because either the end result is not right, or because they face other regulatory issues or compliance issues or don't meet audit requirements. So making sure your stakeholders and the leaders are in the right loop, especially when you create your governance bodies. And then I think it's important to kind of remember tech enablement. We talked about the regulatory environment is changing. New laws, new regulations, new requirements, both external and internal factors, right? So just creating an AI policy or AI strategy or a governance board is not going to be effective unless you continue to reevaluate that periodically. How do you continue to audit your processes? And that's where I think you got to leverage your tech enablement pieces, right? Make use of the technology to continue to have those audit mechanisms in place so that you have your processes here, your policies here, you've got your stakeholder alignment, your intake process, but then leverage technology to really operationalize all of that, right? So, I think kind of getting a full view, a holistic view of all of those actions and kind of helping establish the chief AI officers, offices, as well as those governance bodies are some of the most practical steps that I'm seeing being successful right now.
Thank you. And sticking with implementation, Saptarshi, what technical pitfalls should government agencies anticipate when scaling these AI technologies and adoption?
Right, and great question. So, having worked with customers deploying AI at scale, I have seen, common technical pitfalls that have even derailed well-planned initiatives. So the biggest pitfall is actually treating AI scaling like traditional application scaling. But it's not the same, agencies often underestimate these three critical areas. First of all, the consistent model behavior, then the data pipeline complexity, and the governance overhead. So, when you are in a pilot stage, you're using one model to build your generative AI application. But as you're moving towards building an enterprise-grade application, what happens, you start using multimodal environment, right? You start using different models when you have a large volume of data. During that scenario, it becomes exponentially harder to maintain a consistent model behavior. So that is the reason with Amazon Bedrock, we are addressing this issue through standardized foundation model access and consistent guardrail across all levels. But the key practice here is having your compliance framework, having some kind of compliance framework early in the stages and not at the later stages, because you should define your content policies, access controls, and monitoring requirements early in the stage. Now, the second major pitfall, which I have observed or generally seen, like working with bigger customers, is data pipeline brittleness. So what happens is, AI systems are very sensitive to any kind of data changes or any kind of schema changes or data quality or format issues. we have seen in different use cases where a single data schema change have broken AI system across multiple departments. The best practice is always having some kind of robust data validation and making use of built-in data encryption within Amazon Bedrock, or even having private model copies of your choice to isolate these kind of changes. The third, what I call, is compliance drift. So when you're trying to build your pilot, right, you have compliance, you have maintained your compliance, but when you are actually building enterprise-grade solutions and you're adding more integrations, maintaining FedRAMP High it becomes actually pretty complicated. So Bedrock being natively FedRAMP High with access to GovCloud and with all of these compliance certification, it makes it easier for you to deploy these AI applications. And with automated monitoring, you are actually like monitoring all the time autonomously. So in that case, what's happening is you do not have to worry about doing the audit after the fact. Now, my top recommendation starts with this, like, always use some kind of private link connectivity when you're deploying your generative AI applications at scale, as well as have automated monitoring from day one. So do not retrofit security and governance. Build this foundation as you scale with your AI applications. And this prevents the technical debt that even kills a lot of federal AI initiatives. And the last point, this is very important, is having some kind of model lifecycle management policy. Because these foundation models evolve, right? We see Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and then we see Claude 4 Opus or Claude 4 Sonnet, right? A few days back. So this is very important because as you're building your applications, you should have some kind of testing, validation, or some kind of strategy to gradually roll out these models across critical government operations. So that is very important as well.
Thank you. And I think we could talk about this topic of government adoption of next generation AI all afternoon, but we're at time, but I'm sure our panelists will answer any questions afterwards that you may have. But I want to leave it with one lightning rod question. One sentence answer about one critical takeaway for our audience with respect to government adoption of AI. Let's start with you, Reuben.
Like I said before, start with the end in mind. Consider the human as they interact with the AI.
Thank you, Adita.
I think we're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to be done with agentic and other solutions coming up. Let's just be careful to balance the innovation with the right guardrails. And I think the possibilities are endless.
Thank you. Saptarshi.
I think like when you're building your AI applications at scale, it's very important to keep in mind that there might be hallucinations, right? There should be some kind of mechanisms to filter factual errors from hallucination. That is very important. And to have some kind of governance framework early in the stage, not after.
Thanks to each of you. Please help me thank our panelists today.
Good discussion.